With the WINN FM News, I am Kevin Brown.
And I am Yolana Weeks.
Our top stories: evaluating the impact of COP29 outcomes on SIDS resilience. St. Kitts and Nevis Bar Association panel discussion on sentencing guidelines.
Nevis Island administration intends to hold discussions with the federal government to amend VAT legislation.
Guyana VP Jagdeo says he sees efforts afoot by opposition parties and other organizations to discredit Guyana's election commission. The French embassy commits $1.8 million to combat gender-based violence in St. Lucia and the OECS. Internationally, Syrian rebels close in on Homs. Now, the details. The outcomes from COP29 have sparked significant concern among small island developing states SIDS, particularly regarding their implications for climate resilience strategies. During a recent press conference featuring Raquel Moses, the CEO of the Caribbean Climate Smart Accelerator (CCSA), and Cheryl Senhouse, the Finance Innovation Director at CCSA, both leaders provided insights into the COP29 discussions. They evaluated the consequences of global leaders' commitments. Moses emphasized the need for a clear understanding of the implications of COP29's outcomes on SIDS.
I think we have to be sober about what it means, and that we will be doing this in a very competitive environment. I look at it in two ways. We made progress, and it could have been possible that we didn't make any progress. So while disappointing when you're going in for 1 trillion and you leave with 300 billion, the fact remains that progress is progress. I think the devil is in the details.
She stated, recognizing the competitive environment the SIDS will face moving forward. The conference revealed a commitment of $300 billion annually by 2035, a notable increase from the previous goal, but still far from the $1 trillion initially sought. Despite this disappointment, Moses highlighted that some progress was achieved, reinforcing the coalition's resolve to advocate for their needs effectively. Senhouse added that the climate finance targets, while improving, reveal a fundamental gap in financial support for adaptation strategies.
We must remember that adaptation finance is not a luxury. It is a necessity for the survival of our nations already grappling with the effects of climate change.
This urgent plea underscores the pressing challenges faced by SIDS, which are already experiencing severe climate impacts, such as rising sea levels and extreme weather conditions. The CCSA aims to leverage data through its Climate Smart Map to support decision-making in SIDS, articulating specific needs for adaptation finance. The map aggregates critical information regarding risks, losses, and demographic data, providing a comprehensive view of SIDS challenges. Both Moses and Senhouse urged that this tool will be instrumental in helping stakeholders formulate practical solutions and attract the necessary funding. As the global community approaches COP30, Moses indicated that strategies must evolve to incorporate insights gained from COP29.
So we need to just keep asking the great questions and executing from our own vantage points to ensure that we see the results, and we can't ever say that we left something on the table because, we just weren't committed enough. Let us commit ourselves to this process and making progress every single day.
The advocates acknowledged that collective, sustained efforts will be essential to secure funding and implement climate resilience initiatives for SIDS' future. St. Kitts and Nevis recently hosted a significant panel discussion focusing on sentencing guidelines within the justice system. The panel discussion, organized by the St. Kitts and Nevis Bar Association as part of their annual Law Week, took place on December 5th, 2024, and aimed to engage the public on a vital topic that often stirs controversy: the sentencing of criminal offenses. The panel featured distinguished guests His Lordship Justice Ian Morley, the resident judge of the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court, and Adlai Smith, the Director of Public Prosecutions, DPP. Denise Aline, a well-respected lawyer, moderated the session. The discussion allowed listeners to glean insights about sentencing, an area many find complex and opaque. Aline began by welcoming listeners and highlighting the significance of the panel's topic. She emphasized the Bar Association's commitment to facilitating public understanding of legal issues and addressing current concerns about criminal sentencing in the community. Justice Morley took the floor to introduce himself and elaborate on his extensive background, which includes considerable international legal experience. He spoke about his journey to St. Kitts and Nevis, where he has served in various capacities across the Eastern Caribbean region since 2016. He highlighted that since his appointment in St. Kitts in March 2021, he has willingly tackled case backlogs within the judicial system, a challenge exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. In his introduction, Justice Morley expressed gratitude for connecting with the public and emphasized the need for transparency in sentencing. He detailed the establishment of the Sentencing Guidelines Committee, noting that its ongoing work since 2017 has led to the publication of guidelines for 22 offenses. This initiative aims to clarify expectations for those entering the judicial system, helping defendants and their lawyers understand potential sentencing outcomes based on the structured guidelines.
It's very clear to me that it's a subject that the public may not know very much about. And it influences a lot of the court work. People who get into trouble with the law need to know what could be the sentencing, how will it be structured, what might be the outcome, what happens if they plead guilty. Is there an opportunity to negotiate what they plead guilty to? Can they get an early indication of what their sentence might be if they pleaded guilty?
This structured approach is intended to reduce defendants' uncertainty and anxiety and ensure they are better informed about what lies ahead in their legal journeys. In response, DPP Adlai Smith reflected on the complexities surrounding sentencing. He underscored the importance of educating the public about the rationale biases behind sentencing decisions.
Sentencing is an exercise which is very complicated, often referred to as something that is not an exact science. And a lot of things go into it, and a lot of times persons don't quite understand all that is involved, and as a result, they may be unduly critical of the process. So the purpose of this morning's exercise is to try and give the public an idea of the rationality that's involved in the whole exercise of sentencing.
The discussion naturally segued into pre-bargaining and its implications. DPP Smith noted that plea bargaining, although not traditionally part of the judicial landscape in St. Kitts and Nevis, has been considered for its potential benefits in expediting case resolutions. Introducing such mechanisms could give defendants greater clarity and control over their cases.
I look at it with a reform approach. There are lots of things that need to be done, but in time, one by one, they will be done.
The panel's interactive format allowed for audience engagement, with questions submitted before the discussion illuminating public concerns. Justice Morley and DPP Smith addressed inquiries regarding the nuances of sentencing practices and how implementing guidelines can foster a more informed legal landscape. They pointed out that a confirmed structure allows individuals facing the court system to predict possible outcomes better and understand the ramifications of their decisions, such as whether to plead guilty or pursue alternative actions. As the session drew to a close, both panelists stressed that the Sentencing Guidelines Committee's efforts aim to alleviate fears about sentencing and promote a culture of legal responsiveness and understanding. They jointly expressed optimism about ongoing reforms and their commitment to enhancing the criminal justice system in St. Kitts and Nevis. The panel discussion provided a vital platform for the community to engage with complex legal topics and demystified the sentencing process. With influential speakers like Justice Morley and DPP Smith at the helm, the St. Kitts and Nevis Bar Association continues to forge pathways for public education, ensuring the legal system remains transparent and accessible to all citizens. Check out the full panel discussion on the WINN Media SKN Facebook or YouTube pages. For more on sentencing, from His Lordship Justice Ian Morley, the resident judge of the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court, and Adlai Smith, the Director of Public Prosecutions in St. Kitts and Nevis.
The value-added tax VAT performance in 2024 proved that the tax is a significant revenue earner for the island of Nevis, said Premier Mark Brantley during his budget address for the 2025 fiscal year. The VAT revenue collected in Nevis as of October 31, 2024 shows an increase over the same period in 2023, and it is anticipated that the budgeted target for 2024 will be surpassed.
Our total VAT revenue as of October 31st, 2024, stood at $34.81 million, which indicates an increase of $2.45 million or 7.57% when compared to the $32.36 million collected for the period October 31st, 2023. For the fiscal year 2023, the total VAT receipt was $38.37 million. It is expected that the VAT collections for 2024 will not only surpass those of 2023, but exceed the 2024 budget target of $42 million.
The budget address shows that $20.70 million of VAT receipts as of October 31 were generated from the purchase of domestic goods and services, while $14.11 million was generated through international trade. Despite the positive outcomes, Premier Brantley said the VAT collections are not a full reflection of the state of economic activity on Nevis. Therefore, the Nevis Island Administration intends to amend the VAT legislation to address collection concerns.
I must remind the House and the public that a significant portion of VAT generated from activities on Nevis is paid in Bastille, as allowed in the single filing system under the VAT legislation. The legislation provides for entities registered in St. Kitts but operating a branch on Nevis to pool and file all their VAT receipts on St. Kitts. We estimate that the revenue lost to the administration through this allowance is substantial. We continue to engage in serious discussions at the federal level with a view to having the VAT legislation amended to allow for VAT generated from activities on Nevis to be paid in Nevis, while VAT generated on activities on St. Kitts be paid in St. Kitts. This will allow us to have a much better appreciation of the true state of economic activity in Nevis as measured by VAT generated from local activities.
Initially, there was a 76-24% arrangement for the VAT, 76 for St. Kitts and 24 for Nevis, as the country was reforming the tax system. However, the Concerned Citizens Movement administration in 2014 opted not to pool value-added tax revenues with those of St. Kitts. The CCM leadership felt that St. Kitts was benefiting from Nevis.
In regional news, Guyana VP Jagdeo says he sees efforts afoot by opposition parties and other organizations to discredit Guyana's election commission. Guyana News Source reports.
The General Secretary of the governing People's Progressive Party, Vice President Bharat Jagdeo, has hammered the opposition and other organizations that have been expressing their no confidence in the current leadership at the Elections Commission. At a press conference, Mr. Jagdeo said he is convinced that there is a deliberate and coordinated attempt to discredit the chairman of the Elections Commission and the organization itself. Over the past week alone, the People's National Congress Reform, the Alliance for Change, the Working People's Alliance, a New and United Guyana, and trade union umbrella body, the Guyana Trades Union Congress, all expressed their growing concern over the management of the Elections Commission and the work of the current chairman of the commission, retired Justice Claudette Singh. Vice President Jagdeo came to the defense of the commission and the chairman again today. According to him, political parties and organizations have been unfairly criticizing GCOM in an attempt to discredit the elections management body and future elections.
And I think the motive that should they be able to, or should they succeed in destroying the credibility of GCOM, they may be able to cast doubts on any election conducted by GCOM. And so it is orchestrated. It is orchestrated, and several of these organizations that exist on paper that don't have membership If you add all of their membership up together, they can fill a room. But they're boldly making statements and putting out press releases and getting a lot of these press releases represented in the newspapers and in mainstream media. And I think the primary target of the abuse, I would almost call it abuse, is the chair of GCOM.
The vice president said he believes many persons and political parties are still upset over the stance that the chairperson of GCOM took in the aftermath of the 2020 elections. Mr. Jagdeo, however, did not address the direct concerns that the parties have been expressing on the question of impartiality and fairness. He said the Elections Commission currently has credible leadership.
So if there is anyone who is credible, or any organization or leadership that is credible, it is the commission, not the secretariat. And that is why, to ensure to restore credibility to that the secretariat, some of the people had to be replaced by professionals. And that is what has happened here.
The opposition parties have also been going hard on GCOM on the question of a clean voters list and the introduction of biometrics for next year's elections. The APNU and the AFC have long said that the elections list is bloated by some 200,000 persons and that biometrics should be introduced to avoid duplicate voting. While GCOM is set to be looking into the question of biometrics, the vice president has said it is not something that his party is willing to support at this time, although he has called for the introduction of enhanced biometrics in the past.
The French embassy commits $1.8 million to combat gender-based violence in St. Lucia and the OECS. DBS St. Lucia has the details.
The French embassy in St. Lucia has been a big player in the fight against domestic violence on island. The embassy has been strongly supporting the Stop Gender-Based Violence project in St. Lucia and the OECS. The project is being carried out in partnership with the Department of Gender Affairs. It aims to help raise awareness and reduce domestic violence by developing synergies between the government of St. Lucia and civil society organizations specialized in the field of domestic violence. To aid in this fight, the French embassy is providing 1.8 million EC dollars. Francis Etienne is the French ambassador to St. Lucia.
To make sure that things are right and to make sure that we are transparent in terms of using the money, we have the support, which we really appreciate, of Unite Caribbean. So we are not dealing directly, we give guidelines, and then Unite Caribbean, together with various partners, organizes the action and comes back to us to make sure in a steering committee that everything's all right. I'd like to insist on this because this is a way of working which does imply people who know the ground, who know the people, who know the institutions. And that's a kind of networking as well that we want to promote.
On March 8, 2022, the Domestic Violence Act was passed in St. Lucia. This piece of legislation was designed to step up the fight against domestic violence and provide legal and safety support for survivors, including members of the LGBTQ community. Additionally, the Domestic Violence Act describes and clarifies what is nationally considered to be domestic violence. A little over a year since this legislation was passed, the Stop the Gender-Based Violence project was launched in May of 2023. Ambassador Etienne details what the project has been able to accomplish.
I think the awareness is greater, that there are things you can't tolerate anymore in a society. What we want basically is a change in the mindset, not only for the men, but for the women themselves. You have to free speech, you have to take the floor, you have to express yourself. And it's difficult as victims to speak. So having free speech, having a word, going to the police, going to people who can support you is essential in a process. But the ultimate goal is, of course, to deter the male side of the population.
November of 2023 saw the launch of the Know Your Rights campaign ahead of the 16 days of activism. The campaign saw the use of billboards and information kits to raise awareness amongst women and young girls in St. Lucia. Ambassador Etienne says that violence against women and children is a big problem for all societies. In France, a woman is killed by her partner every 3 days. In St. Lucia, sexual offenses increased by 19% during 2024 when compared to the year 2023, although the Royal St. Lucia Police Force has not stated what percentage of the victims are women and children. According to UN Women, almost 1 in 2 women have experienced at least one form of violence in their lifetime in the region. Moreover, almost half of Caribbean women, 46% to be exact, have experienced at least one form of intimate partner violence.
The very first paper which was on my desk on the first day when I came, 1st of October 22, was a letter addressed to me by a head of an association speaking about a woman of 19 years old with 2 kids being beaten and threatened by the husband, and she wanted to have her sheltered so that we could protect her by sending her to Martinique or Guadeloupe. Very first case. We tried our best, we found a solution.
The civil society organizations, which the French Embassy is providing funds through the Department of Gender Affairs on the Stop Gender-Based Violence project, are the Women's Support Center, 758 Pride, St. Lucia Crisis Center, St. Lucia Planned Parenthood Association, Girls of a Feather, Do Nation Foundation, and Raise Your Voice St. Lucia. For the DBS News World, Miriam Montoute reporting.
We now bring you these international reports.
Now, tens of thousands of people are fleeing the Syrian city of Homs as rebel Islamist fighters close in, and the speed at which the armed opposition is advancing across the country has astonished everyone, with the Syrian army loyal to President Assad simply falling away. Well, the civil war began in 2011, but the rebels with links to Al-Qaeda were forced into retreat 5 years later. Now they're back, and in just 10 days have taken the whole of Syria's second city, largest city of Aleppo. Another major city, Hama, that fell yesterday. And now in their sights, they're looking at Homs. Success there could see the main road from the capital, Damascus, cut to the Syrian coast, the stronghold of President Assad. He's seen all this lightning loss of territory because backers like Russia, Iran and Hezbollah are currently fighting other conflicts. Well, with the very latest from the Turkey-Syria border, here's Hugo Bachega.
The rebels' advance has been swift and astonishing. Yesterday, they captured Hama, almost unopposed. There were celebrations as they entered the city. I can't describe my joy, this man says. We wish that every honorable Syrian can experience these happy moments. The rebels said they wouldn't stop there, and they didn't. Today, they continue to make progress towards Homs. They still haven't taken the city as the military tries to slow their progress. The civil war in Syria started in 2011 when President Bashar al-Assad crushed protests against his regime. A rebel stronghold, Homs was under siege for 3 years, and the last opposition forces left the city in 2015 under a deal brokered by the UN.
If the rebels take Homs, Damascus, the capital, would be quite an easier target. The Syrian army has folded, that the state capacity has been degraded a great deal. The writing on the wall.
Frozen for years, the front lines in Syria are changing fast. This is an insurgency led by Islamist rebels from a group known as HTS. They have their roots in Al-Qaeda, but are trying to rebrand themselves as a nationalist force. From their base in Idlib in the northwest, they launched a surprise lightning campaign last week. They took Aleppo, the country's second largest city, and continue to push south. This is their leader, Abu Mohammed al-Julani. In this interview to CNN, he said the goal was to topple the Assad regime and bring Syrian refugees back home.
people will return to their homes. Many refugees in Turkey will likely return, as will a significant number of refugees in Lebanon and Jordan. Even refugees in Europe may return to rebuild their country.
They're vowing to reach Damascus, and Bashar al-Assad is struggling to stop them. In the past, he relied heavily on Russia and Iran to fight the opposition. But both allies are preoccupied with their own affairs. The rebels have the momentum, and the regime, in power for 24 years, is increasingly under threat. And the rebels have faced very little opposition in this offensive so far. The Syrian military is demoralized and exhausted after more than 13 years of conflict. But this could change. Iran says it will send missiles, drones and advisors to help President Assad in the response against this insurgency. Now, the rebels continue to advance. In the past, the president used brutality to curb the opposition. He's much weaker now, but that could change.
Let's head to New York because police there are continuing their hunt for the gunman who killed the boss of one of the biggest companies in the world. On Thursday, detectives shared new images of the man they want to question over the shooting of the United Healthcare executive Brian Thompson outside a hotel on Wednesday morning. The man appears relaxed and smiling. Just a few minutes later, he shot Mr. Thompson dead before making his escape. Well, more details are emerging about his movements leading up to the killing, but so far his whereabouts remain unknown and his motive is yet to be fully established. Let's speak to our correspondent John Sudworth, who's there in New York for us. And John, what is the latest that's coming from the police and also from New York's mayor?
Well, as you say, Matthew, the suspect is still at large, but the police over the past couple of days have gathered a pretty substantial body of evidence, multiple sightings on camera, both before and after the shooting, details about the suspect's movements. He apparently attempted to use a fake identification to check into a hostel up on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. And also the police say he arrived in New York by Greyhound bus on the 24th of November, a bus that left Atlanta, headed for New York that day. And these latest images, a very clear view of what they are describing as a person of interest, very clear view of his face. The reporting around the release of those images suggests that they were taken at the check-in desk of the hostel when the member of staff there asked the person to remove their mask and give her a smile, which he then did. And I think you have to conclude from the quality of that image that even if they are no closer to making an arrest in this case, they must be getting closer to a firm identification of who it is they're looking for.
And John, devastating for the family. Just remind our viewers, because there has been some detail of previous threats, haven't there?
Yeah, well, on the day of the shooting, Matthew, Brian Thompson's wife gave an interview in which she said that her husband had been receiving threats. She didn't go into much detail about the nature of those threats, but that will clearly feed into the investigation. Brian Thompson, as you mentioned, was the chief executive of one of the world's biggest companies, America's largest healthcare provider. It provides insurance for 50 million Americans. And for this to happen, on the streets of Manhattan, downtown, busy tourist area of this city is, of course, hugely shocking, not just for the family and the company, but for this city and America more generally. Interestingly, Matthew, in terms of motive, the police are not giving any detail. There's a lot of speculation, as you might imagine. A suggestion, again from police sources, that the bullet casings recovered at the scene had the words "deny, defend and depose" written on them, and some reporting suggesting that those words closely match some of the language around the concern from campaigners that America's large healthcare companies often strategize ways to avoid paying their network of patients. A lot of concern about that over the past few years. So, in the wake of this shooting, an outpouring of similar complaints on social media here. Now, we do not know at this stage whether Mr. Thompson's position as CEO of United Healthcare was connected to this killing. But what's very clear is that a lot of the healthcare companies are taking precautions themselves, removing from their websites the leadership pages showing the photographs and names of the senior management teams.
Now, the fate of TikTok in North America could be decided this week. In a decision due today, a federal appeals court is set to say whether or not they uphold an appeal by TikTok over a US law which demands the social media app is sold by its Chinese parent company, ByteDance. So, what can we expect today? That's what I put to social media expert Jasmine Engberg earlier.
It's not looking good for TikTok right now, given the difficult day that it had in court in September. And as you mentioned, we are expecting a decision today. And there's a lot of different ways that this could shake out. So we could see the judges uphold the law, in which case TikTok will appeal to the Supreme Court pretty quickly. We could also see the judges uphold the law, but say that it is unfair to TikTok because it singles out one specific company, which could then lead to a delay. Or we could see the judges strike down the law. Now, that last scenario is probably the least likely scenario, again, given how the court day played out in September. But what we do know is that there is still a lot up in the air, and this saga is going to continue, especially given that one day after the deadline for the divest or be banned law on January 20th, Donald Trump is due to take office here.
Yeah. Well, that's a really interesting point because he prompted this ban. He was in favor of it. He was a big backer of it. And now he seems to have changed his tune. Why?
Well, so he was the first to try to ban TikTok back in 2020, and he did that through an executive order, which ultimately failed. Now, since then, we have seen him join TikTok. He, to your point, has also said that he opposes banning TikTok, and there are reports that suggest that he would try to halt the enforcement of the ban once he takes office. Now, that is a lot easier said than done. So while Trump could be a lifeline for TikTok, there is still a long way to go for that to actually happen. For one, many of the people who he has picked for his administration support a ban. Project 2025 also clearly lays out a ban. So relying on Trump to save TikTok is not really a strong strategy here.
You were listening to the WINN FM 98.9 newscast. Our top stories were evaluating the impact of COP29 outcomes on SIDS resilience, St. Kitts and Nevis Bar Association panel discussion on sentencing guidelines.
Nevis Island administration intends to hold discussions with the federal government to amend VAT legislation.
Guyana VP Jagdeo says he sees efforts afoot by opposition parties and other organizations to discredit Guyana's election commission. The French embassy commits $1.8 million to combat gender-based violence in St. Lucia and the OECS. Internationally, Syrian rebels close in on Homs. Thank you for listening.